It does not begin with a single moment. No announcement echoes across the world. No sudden transformation appears on every news screen. Instead, the change unfolds gradually over years and generations until historians eventually recognize what has happened. Every nation on Earth now identifies with Judaism. For thousands of years, Judaism had existed as one of the oldest surviving religious traditions in human history. Its roots stretched back to ancient civilizations, long before many modern nations were even imagined. Yet throughout most of that history, Judaism remained the faith of a relatively small community compared to the global population. Now that has changed. Across continents, cultures have embraced its teachings, traditions, and worldview until one day the numbers become undeniable. The entire world now lives within the framework of Judaism. At first, people struggle to understand the meaning of such a transformation. Unlike religions that historically spread through large missionary movements, Judaism traditionally emphasized community, heritage, and study rather than active conversion. Becoming Jewish has long been a serious and thoughtful commitment involving years of learning and spiritual preparation. Yet somehow, humanity has taken that path together. The first visible change appears in the rhythm of the week. For centuries, most of the world followed a schedule centered around constant activity. Work rarely stopped and economies moved continuously. Now everything pauses once every 7 days. From Friday evening to Saturday evening, the entire planet observes Shabbat. Cities grow quieter as sunset approaches on Friday. Families gather for shared meals. Candles are lit in homes across every continent. Phones are set aside. Work stops. Markets close. For 24 hours, humanity experiences something unusual in the modern age: rest. At first, many corporations and industries struggle to adapt. Global markets must reorganize around a universal pause. Airlines adjust schedules. Digital services shift maintenance periods to coincide with the weekly rest. But gradually, societies discover something unexpected. The shared pause begins to reshape how people think about time. Instead of endless productivity, life gains a rhythm that includes reflection and family connection. Children grow up knowing that once each week, the entire world slows down together. In homes everywhere, families gather around dinner tables on Friday nights. Bread is shared. Blessings are spoken. Conversations replace the noise of daily work. For many people, it becomes the most meaningful part of the week. Another change appears in education. Judaism has always placed enormous value on study and questioning. In traditional Jewish culture, learning is considered a sacred responsibility. Debate, discussion, and interpretation are not discouraged. They are encouraged. Now that value spreads across the entire planet. Schools emphasize critical thinking, philosophy, history, and ethical reasoning. Students learn not only scientific subjects but also traditions of interpretation developed over centuries of Jewish scholarship. The ancient practice of studying sacred texts becomes a global intellectual tradition. Libraries expand. Discussion halls appear in universities and community centers where people gather to explore complex moral questions. Rather than treating religion as a set of fixed answers, many societies adopt Judaism's long tradition of dialogue, the idea that understanding often grows through debate. For some observers, this intellectual culture becomes one of the most fascinating features of the New World. The global emphasis on education accelerates scientific and technological progress. Researchers are encouraged to ask difficult questions rather than avoid them. Curiosity becomes a virtue celebrated in both spiritual and academic communities. Meanwhile, daily life begins reflecting other Jewish traditions. Dietary laws influence global food production. Entire industries reorganize to follow kosher guidelines. Food labeling systems become extremely detailed so that consumers everywhere understand how meals are prepared. Restaurants adapt. Supermarkets adjust supply chains. Even large agricultural systems evolve to meet the new expectations. While the changes require major adjustments, they also create a surprising sense of shared cultural identity. Travelers moving between countries notice familiar traditions everywhere. Families gathering for Shabbat dinners, communities celebrating holidays together, and schools emphasizing study as a central value. Jewish holidays also reshape the global calendar. Rosh Hashanah becomes a worldwide moment of reflection, a time when billions consider the year that has passed and the year ahead. Yom Kippur becomes the most solemn day of the year across the planet. For 24 hours, the world becomes remarkably quiet as people fast and reflect on forgiveness, responsibility, and personal growth. Even people who rarely attend synagogue take time to consider their actions and relationships. The Day of Atonement becomes one of humanity's most powerful shared experiences. Other holidays bring celebration. During Hanukkah, lights appear in windows across continents. Children spin dreidels in cities that once followed completely different traditions. Communities gather to remember stories of perseverance and resilience. Yet even as these shared traditions spread, cultural diversity remains strong. Judaism, now practiced everywhere, adapts to local languages and customs. In Africa, celebrations blend with vibrant musical traditions. In Asia, architecture combines ancient Jewish symbols with local design styles. In the Americas and Europe, synagogues appear in both historic buildings and modern urban structures. The faith becomes global without erasing the uniqueness of each culture. But unity also raises new questions. Because Judaism has always been deeply connected to ideas of community and covenant, the concept that people share a special responsibility to live according to ethical principles. Now that the entire world follows the same tradition, scholars begin asking what that covenant means for humanity as a whole. If everyone shares the same spiritual heritage, does responsibility expand beyond individual communities to the entire planet? These questions influence politics and international cooperation. The Jewish concept of repairing the world, often expressed in the phrase tikkun olam, becomes a guiding principle for global initiatives. Environmental protection programs expand dramatically. Healthcare and education systems receive massive support. Communities organize volunteer networks dedicated to improving conditions for vulnerable populations. Yet despite these positive developments, challenges remain. Because even when people share the same religion, they do not automatically share the same interpretations. Different schools of Jewish thought emerge around the world, debating how ancient teachings should guide modern life. Some communities emphasize strict adherence to traditional practices. Others interpret the teachings more flexibly, focusing on ethical principles rather than detailed rules. These discussions become part of everyday life. Families debate ideas at dinner tables. Students question their teachers in classrooms. Scholars publish new interpretations of ancient texts. For many people, this atmosphere of debate becomes one of the most vibrant features of the new era. Instead of suppressing disagreement, Judaism's long tradition of argument and interpretation allows different perspectives to exist within the same faith. But perhaps the most surprising transformation happens in how humanity views identity itself. For most of history, religion often separated communities from one another. Now that everyone shares the same spiritual tradition, identity begins shifting towards something deeper. People define themselves less by what they believe and more by how they live. Honesty in business, kindness toward strangers, responsibility toward family, respect for knowledge. These values, deeply rooted in Jewish ethical teachings, become the standards by which individuals judge themselves and others. Still, human nature remains complex. Political disagreements continue. Economic competition persists. Cultural differences shape societies in unique ways. The world discovers something important. A shared religion does not erase diversity. Instead, it creates a common language through which humanity explores its differences. And as generations grow up in a world where Judaism is universal, a new philosophical question begins to echo through classrooms, synagogues, and public debates. If the entire world shares the same covenant, what does it truly mean to live according to it? The answer, as always, depends not only on tradition or belief, but on the choices humanity makes every day. Years pass, and the world slowly settles into its new identity. Judaism is no longer the faith of a small historical community. It has become the spiritual framework of the entire planet. Synagogues stand in every city, every village, every region of the world. Their designs vary widely, some built with ancient stone and traditional arches, others constructed from glass and steel in the centers of modern cities. But their purpose remains the same. They are places of gathering, discussion, and study, because in this new world, faith is not defined only by prayer. It is defined by learning. From the beginning of the transformation, one tradition spreads faster than any other: the culture of study. For centuries, Jewish life placed enormous value on learning and interpretation. Sacred texts were not simply read. They were analyzed, debated, questioned, and explored through generations of scholarship. Now that tradition becomes global. Across the world, people gather in study halls to discuss ancient teachings. Libraries expand rapidly, filled with both classical religious texts and modern philosophical works examining their meaning. Students sit across from one another, asking questions that have echoed for centuries. Why do certain laws exist? How should ancient teachings apply to modern life? What responsibilities does humanity have toward the world it inhabits? Instead of discouraging questions, teachers encourage them. Debate becomes a respected form of learning. In classrooms, students challenge interpretations offered by scholars. Discussions continue late into the night as communities examine ideas from multiple perspectives. This intellectual culture spreads into other areas of life. Scientific research flourishes. Many educators emphasize that curiosity and questioning, long traditions in Jewish scholarship, also form the foundation of scientific discovery. Universities grow into enormous centers of knowledge where theology, philosophy, science, and technology intersect. Medical research advances rapidly. Astronomers explore distant galaxies with renewed fascination. Philosophers debate the meaning of consciousness, ethics, and human responsibility. The pursuit of knowledge becomes not only an academic activity but a cultural expectation. At the same time, the weekly rhythm of Shabbat continues shaping daily life. For one day every week, the entire planet slows down. Technology quiets, businesses close, families gather around tables illuminated by candlelight. What began as a religious tradition gradually becomes one of the most powerful social experiences humanity has ever shared. People rediscover the value of rest. In earlier centuries, modern life often pushed individuals toward constant work and endless productivity. Now, once every 7 days, the entire world pauses. During these hours, conversations replace noise. Children hear stories from their grandparents. Friends gather for meals that last late into the evening. Communities rediscover something modern life had nearly forgotten: time together. But as humanity grows accustomed to this rhythm, new challenges emerge. Because Judaism, when practiced globally, requires interpretation across many cultures. Some communities follow ancient traditions very closely. Their daily lives reflect detailed observance of religious laws governing food, clothing, and personal conduct. Other communities emphasize the ethical teachings more strongly than the specific practices. They focus on values such as justice, kindness, and responsibility while adapting certain traditions to modern lifestyles. These differences create lively debates. Yet debate itself is not seen as a threat. In fact, disagreement becomes one of the defining characteristics of the new world. Public discussions often resemble extended study sessions rather than political arguments. Scholars reference centuries of commentary. Historians explain how earlier generations approached similar questions. Philosophers introduce new perspectives shaped by modern science and global culture. In this environment, disagreement becomes a path toward understanding rather than division. Meanwhile, global holidays reshape the emotional calendar of humanity. Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, becomes a moment when billions pause to reflect on their lives. Across continents, people gather to consider the year that has passed and the one that lies ahead. The sound of the shofar, the ancient ram's horn, echoes through cities large and small. Its haunting tone reminds people of responsibility, renewal, and hope. 10 days later comes Yom Kippur. On this day, the world becomes quiet. Billions fast together. Public spaces grow still as individuals focus on reflection and forgiveness. People write letters to those they have wronged. Families speak honestly about past mistakes. Communities gather to acknowledge that every human life contains moments of failure and the possibility of redemption. It becomes one of the most powerful global experiences humanity has ever known. Even individuals who are not deeply religious often participate, recognizing the emotional and ethical significance of the day. Beyond these moments of reflection, another idea begins shaping global culture: the concept of tikkun olam, repairing the world. In Jewish thought, this phrase expresses the belief that human beings share responsibility for improving the world around them. Now that the entire planet follows this tradition, the concept becomes a guiding principle for international cooperation. Environmental protection becomes one of humanity's greatest priorities. Massive global programs focus on restoring forests, cleaning oceans, and protecting fragile ecosystems. Scientists and religious leaders work together, arguing that caring for the earth is both a moral obligation and a practical necessity. Technology companies develop sustainable energy systems. Cities redesign infrastructure to reduce environmental impact. For many people, repairing the world becomes both a spiritual and practical mission. But human nature does not disappear. Even in a world united by a single religion, political tensions continue. Countries still compete economically. Leaders still struggle for influence. Differences in culture and history continue shaping how societies operate. Yet these conflicts occur within a shared moral language. When leaders make decisions, citizens often judge them through the ethical principles taught in Jewish tradition: justice, compassion, responsibility. When those values are ignored, criticism becomes intense. Because in a world where everyone shares the same religious foundation, hypocrisy becomes impossible to hide. If leaders speak about morality but act selfishly, the contradiction is obvious to everyone. Public trust rises and falls quickly depending on whether leaders live according to the principles they claim to follow. Meanwhile, art and culture flourish. Jewish storytelling traditions influence literature and cinema around the world. Stories exploring themes of exile, perseverance, wisdom, and ethical responsibility resonate deeply with audiences. Music blends ancient melodies with modern styles. Visual art incorporates Hebrew calligraphy alongside contemporary design. Cultural creativity expands as artists explore the relationship between ancient tradition and modern life. And as generations grow up in this world, they begin asking questions their ancestors never imagined. If everyone belongs to the same faith, what does belief truly mean? Is faith defined by tradition, by participation in rituals, or by the choices individuals make when faced with moral challenges? These questions lead to a deeper understanding. Religion alone cannot transform humanity. Even when the entire world shares the same spiritual framework, human behavior still depends on individual decisions. Kindness cannot be forced. Justice cannot exist only in words. Wisdom requires effort. Slowly, the world begins realizing that the most important part of this transformation was never the label of religion itself. It was the opportunity. A shared tradition created a common moral language, a foundation upon which humanity could build something better. But whether that opportunity succeeds depends on what people choose to do with it. And so the world continues forward. Cities grow, families raise children, scholars debate ancient texts and modern ideas. Communities gather every week to pause, rest, and remember what matters most. Under the same sky, in countless languages and cultures, humanity shares one spiritual heritage. Yet each person still faces the same quiet question. Not what do you believe, but something far more important. How will you live?